I spend a lot of time asking people to send things my way that they think I should take a look at, and for things of reasonable length, I do. Even for things of unreasonable length, I'm trying to give it a shot. But when people disagree with the things that I have to say, they typically send me rants and screeds that are not rationally justified. For the religious, it's "the Bible says," or "I believe this, so it has to be true." For political issues, it's usually long manifestos detailing what people wish was true without presenting any actual evidence or logical examination of what is actually true or what actually works in the real world. This time out, Jesse Thomas, unhappy with my video on the absurdity of anti-statism, sent me in this short video to review, a video called "George Ought to Help. Let's see if he really should."
Imagine you have a friend called George.
Okay, I'm imagining. Hi, George. How's it hanging?
You've been friends since childhood. Although you're not as close as you were back then, you still see each other once in a while and get along very well. One day, you and George are approached by an old mutual friend, Oliver.
Hey, look, it's Oliver! And he has a talking cloud over his head raining on him. Yeah, that's not weird or anything. Why is that cloud taking a piss on our good friend? And have we seen Oliver lately? Or, as with George, have we just gone our separate ways? I can't wait to see what happens next.
Oliver explains that he's had a run of bad luck and is raising money to cover tuition fees for his kids. You want to help Oliver out, so you give him some money.
Which is actually a nice thing to do, given that Oliver is such a good friend and all. However, I want to say something else, but before I do, I have to explain how I do these videos and what my purpose is. In virtually all cases, I do not pre-screen the videos I respond to. As I'm writing what I'm going to say, I'm seeing the video for the first time, as is the case here. I watch a bit, I cut that chunk of the video out, I write my response, lather, rinse, repeat. Now, I bring this up because I want to make it clear that I'm not purposely trying to take issue with the video or the video's message, and from time to time, because I have no idea what's coming, I can only respond to the particular part of the video that I'm responding to. It may become irrelevant later on. The assumed purpose of a particular segment may be changed later on. I just don't know. So I'm going to say something now that may or may not mean anything in a minute or two. Anyhow, I absolutely would give Oliver the money if I could, assuming that this was the first time he'd come to me, which I'm assuming from the video. If Oliver showed up every other week with his hand out because he wasn't having bad luck but he was making poor life choices, that would be another matter entirely. Certainly, I'd try to help if I could, but perhaps by trying to get him back on track instead of just giving him another subsidy. Will this matter? I don't know. Only time will tell.
To your surprise, George doesn't offer Oliver any help. You try to persuade him, but it's no use. Imagining yourself in this situation, do you think it's okay to threaten to use physical force against George to get him to do the right thing?
No, but no one has defined the right thing. It's just being assumed. Maybe Oliver's been hitting George up for cash for weeks now, and George is fed up, but isn't going to say anything to save Oliver's feelings. Maybe George has no money to give. You don't know. You've only just run into him after not having seen him for a while. Regardless, this is a personal situation between friends. There are no right or wrong answers here. Well, Oliver needs an umbrella, and someone needs to tell that stupid narrator cloud to stop whizzing on his head. I mean, talk about kicking a guy when they're down.
Now imagine a slightly different situation. This time, a group of your friends take a vote. 6 out of 10 are in favour of threatening George to get him to help Oliver. Does this democratic process make it okay to threaten George?
You're still talking about friends, though. This isn't a society, and this is just a couple of people that know each other well, deciding if they should help someone else that they know well in their hour of need. Presumably, and this is just a guess, the friends would know if Oliver is actually in dire financial straits or if he's just wasting all the money on hookers and blow. Regardless, since they keep specifying physical violence, the answer has to be no. There is never any cause for physical violence. and I suspect this is going to play in later.
If we approve of state programs that redistribute wealth, we must also approve of threats of violence made against peaceful individuals, because this is how the funds are collected. On the other hand, most of us feel uncomfortable about threatening peaceful people when we imagine having to make the threats ourselves.
But now we've completely changed the scenario. This isn't just a minor alteration as they seem to think. This is a completely different situation. It's not a friendly loan between friends to get one of them out of a jam. It's not a threat of physical violence that one group is going to assault someone else for not following their dictates. We're now talking about things on a societal level. Now, I already know this is something that Jesse Thomas doesn't like, but hating reality doesn't change reality. There is, whether you like it or not, something called the social contract. It exists in every social group, no matter how large or how small. It defines how the members are expected to behave, how they are expected to interact, and how they are expected to contribute. That's just the way it is. Even in a family, perhaps the smallest social group, there are rules for who has to do what, who's in charge, who has to do what chores, who has to go to work, and who has to go to school, and what expectations each family member has. That's a social contract, and it doesn't change if you're talking about 1,000 people in a small town, or 1 million people in a state, or 320 million people in a country. There are always going to be laws. There are always going to be expectations and requirements, and you don't have to like them. You are inherently bound by them because you choose to remain within that society. If you don't like the laws of the nation in which you live, you can attempt to change them. To do that, you have to convince a majority of voters to support your ideas. If they do, the laws change. If they do not, they do not. And if you really hate it, you're welcome to get up and leave the nation entirely and find somewhere else that has ideals more in line with your thinking, assuming that they'll take you. Welcome to reality.
One last change to the situation. This time, imagine that many thousands of people have democratically agreed that a group, who we'll call the agents, should do whatever is necessary to take money from George and give it to Oliver's family. The agents don't explicitly threaten George at first. All they do is send him a bill. Like everyone else, though, George knows what will happen if he doesn't pay the bill. First, he'll get more letters demanding payment, and the bill will get bigger. Eventually, if he still doesn't pay, agents with guns will break into his house and take him away against his will. Almost everyone pays the bills without protest. They know that agents are prepared to use as much force as necessary to overpower you if you resist.
But nobody is threatening the use of violence against George. George is failing to meet his responsibilities as a member of that society, a society that he voluntarily remains a member of, getting all of the privileges that that society offers. If he chooses not to meet his obligations, then certainly the society, through its elected government, is entirely warranted in using whatever force the public has authorized under the law to compel people to take responsibility for their actions or inactions.
Do you think it's acceptable for the agents to threaten violence against George if he doesn't give his money towards helping Oliver's family?
So let's look at this a different way. Let's say that you agreed to give some money to Oliver under the condition that he pay it back to you next week, maybe with a little bit of interest. Next week, Oliver doesn't have the money. He doesn't have it the week after either. In fact, you start to think that Oliver will never have the money, not because he can't get it, because he just doesn't care about paying you back. You had an agreement. He owes you that money. Are you just going to allow him not to pay, or are you going to pursue whatever means are necessary to recoup your losses? Anti-statists like our blue cloud here seem to think that they have no obligations to anyone because they don't feel like having them. They figure that they didn't agree to these obligations, therefore they don't exist. They're wrong. It's like saying a child didn't agree to be born into a family, therefore they have no obligation to listen to their parents or do their chores. They're simply operating on faulty logic. I don't care if you agreed to the social contract or not. You are still beholden to it. Time to grow up and deal with reality.
If we feel negatively towards the idea of threatening George personally, can we really be comfortable with the threats made against him by agents of the state?
Absolutely. Because we have collectively elected representatives to do the bidding of the people, to make and enforce laws, and to hold individuals responsible for their actions or inactions. I'm completely comfortable with that because that's how you have a functional society. That's how every functional society on the planet operates. There has never been a successful, healthy anarchy anywhere on the planet ever in human history. It just doesn't work that way. There are far too many people who engage in magical thinking, expecting that if we just wish hard enough, magical ponies will appear and make everything okay. And that's just not how it works.
Some people believe that voluntary interaction and spontaneous order are realistic and preferable alternatives to state coercion as a way of organizing society.
And those people are out of their frickin' minds. It has never happened in all of human history that people have not formed an organizing structure, often called a government, for dealing with social problems. Anarchy just doesn't work. It has never worked, and it will never work. If you want us to change the way things are done, you have to prove with actual, objective evidence that it is actually possible for this to work. And you let us know when you come up with one.
Do a web search for some of these terms if you're interested in learning more.
Yes, and add to that irrational, unrealistic, faith-based, and foolish. You might as well. That's really what they're talking about. Wishful thinking doesn't make it so. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about religion or politics. These ideas are totally unsupported by any kind of objective evidence or well-reasoned arguments. You might as well be looking for Bigfoot or leprechauns, and trust me, you can find plenty of those crazy people who believe in those online too. I don't know about you, but I'm not at all impressed. This is just childish thinking, totally without merit, told by a talking blue cloud who apparently knows nothing whatsoever about human nature, human society, or humanity in general. Just because you really want something to be true, that doesn't mean that it is. Just because you really hope something is going to work, that doesn't mean that it will. Most people know that libertarianism is wacky. Its ideas make no sense. They're just utter fantasy, and that's why the Libertarian Party, in existence for more than 40 years, has never even cracked the 5% mark in presidential elections. People know they're nuts, just like they know the Constitution Party is nuts, or the Greens, or the Communists. Blind faith isn't anything to be proud of, not in religion and not in politics. Maybe it's time people rented a clue and figured that out. Thanks again to Jesse Thomas for sending in the video. I encourage anyone else that has something interesting to send it my way, either in the comments or at this email address. Do try to keep the videos to a reasonable length. I still have people sending in videos 30 minutes or longer, and those are really hard to do, although I am trying. So until next time, please think about the things that you believe. It really does stop you from looking foolish.